I'll tell you one thing that I love is a dedicated fandom. Like, I have not fallen in love with hockey, but I can't get enough of the Oilers fans because they are incredibly fascinating to watch. They have this intensity that you just don't see very often. The Oilers fandom is just built different. The group chat's here. Let's get into it. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. And look, I think the place for us to start is right here.
You know the Oilers are ready. You know McDavid is ready. Your Capitan, your Capitan. Oh, Capitan.
That's just a song you can download now, should you choose to. That's a thing that you can choose to put on your phone. That is the Edmonton Opera with a little Oilers spin on La Bamba, because that's the song that plays in the arena, in the home arena, when the Oilers win a game. That version was released last year when the Oilers were in the Stanley Cup Finals. Well, guess what? They are back in the finals again, and once again, we get a delightful treat of seeing this intensity of the Edmonton Oilers fandom, the kind of fandom that kind of from the outside looks a little bit like a religion that's rooted in the history and mythology of Alberta itself. Game 4 is tomorrow. Today, Min Dhariwal from CBC Edmonton is here, and Judith Ellen Brunton, who is a professor and proud Albertan who's thought a lot about how hockey, oil, and religion come together in that province. Judith and Min, welcome to the show, y'all. How's it going?
Hey, great. Thanks for having us.
Listen, I'm delighted to have you. It was delightful to watch both of you dance as that version of La Bamba played. That was a nice time. Min, I'll start with you. I'll start by maybe offering my condolences over Game 3, but also I hope things get a little bit better. But we're not here to talk about what is happening on the ice. We're here to talk about something else. Give me a sense of the vibe of what happens when the Oilers are in the finals.
Yeah, well, after a game like Game 3, the vibe kind of gets knocked down, definitely a couple of notches. But, I mean, this run has been as good, if not better, than last year's, and the city is just alive, right? It doesn't matter if you go into a store, you jump into an Uber or a cab, the driver might be wearing an Oilers jersey or might have a flag on the car. You go downtown, you see flags and Oilers paraphernalia in the windows, up in the towers. People wearing jerseys on game day. I mean, on game days, the downtown just becomes a zoo, quite literally, and people are wearing their jerseys all day long. So it has certainly made spring and summertime in Edmonton the last couple of years very different from how it used to be for many, many years.
Judith, the premise of this conversation is actually like it's not just that a city gets excited when their team is in the finals. Is that there is something different about this fandom. And I mentioned that you're a professor of religious studies. Your particular area is Alberta, and the way that religious ideology intertwines with the province's culture of oil, but also oil production, prosperity, and also hockey. You've recently written about this for the conversation about how like the history kind of amplifies this intensity of this fandom. Can you just unpack that idea of where this fandom maybe meets religion?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, you said it. When there's something weird going on, that's like a good moment for a scholar of religion to appear. So here I am. And I think that like whenever we talk about shared values or zeal or identity or commitment, that's a good moment to think about religion, because religion, one way to describe religion is just kind of a technology of shared values or an idea, a way people organize their values together. And scholars of religion and sport, which include my co-author for that piece, Cody Musselman, have studied a lot about how team sports act really religionly. I mean, she also does personal fitness, so like CrossFit and SoulCycle, those are also pretty religion-y. Yes. But team sports are very religion. They have lots of rituals, they have prayers and superstitions, folks wear special clothing, they have certain ideas of how to preserve purity, averting your eyes. So this is a lot of that is always already going on with sports. And then, of course, we can add oil to this, because Oilers evoked another aspect of Canadian society that I think for some people have almost religious importance, which is resource extraction. And in Canadian culture, oil has always been kind of entangled with religion, both religion as we would recognize it institutionally, but also kind of this idea that it's like a blessing from God, or it's tied up in ideas of what a good life is and how to live it. So for lots of peoples in resource extraction communities like Alberta, the possibility of success and the good life that promises really gets kind of valued over and above other possible risks, including environmental. And the Edmonton Oilers showcase this worldview for sure, in which there's this kind of idea of triumph and luck and rugged work where that pays off. This is a belief that functions on the ice and in the oil field. So luck is really central to both worldviews, oil worldviews and hockey worldviews. Historically, this is essential for perseverance within fossil fuel extraction. Striking it rich in the oil fields is really entangled with the idea of divine providence.
Right.
And sports, similarly, is thrilling, right? You can put all this work in, you can have all the great plans, you have all the right players, but it really takes luck to strike it rich. So oil culture is definitely, in the case of the Oilers, pairing this idea of divine favor with an insistence on rough and tumble endurance, which is definitely what's happening on the ice.
And also, I mean, it really helps that, you know, when a city gets a savior, they call him McJesus. It kind of makes the point a little more literal on your behalf here. But I want to go back to the thing that you just said a moment ago, but the idea of religion being a technology for shared values. If that's true, and the Oilers fandom functions as a religion, what are the values that are sort of that we're talking about here?
Well, I think that one of the values that's really translating almost directly from oil culture in Alberta to the Oilers is what it takes as a person and as a team to endure a boom and a bust, right? With the Oilers, we're talking about years of perseverance, but also loss. And when it comes to this kind of living within that story, losing is kind of just as important as winning, in the sense that it's a test of your character, it's a test of the fans, and it's definitely a test of the players. So in that kind of worldview, luck, you need luck to persevere within a boom and bust cycle, but you also need personal virtues of working hard, playing hard, and committing to this arc and having kind of faith that it will bring you where you want to be eventually.
I like that you started that answer, and then very wearily, you know, Min was like, yeah, she's right. So if we're going to compare Oilers fandom to religion, I think it's only right that we hear one of the great hymns of this religion. Let's have a listen. So you saw this video that went viral last year of Oilers fans singing Neil Diamond's Sweet Caroline outside of Rogers Place after a playoff game victory. Min, there was this recent headline in the Edmonton Journal that said, there may be no other team in Canada that means as much to its city as the Edmonton Oilers. Why do you think that is? Like, what makes that different than a Toronto or a Vancouver or a Montreal, you think?
Well, I think you have to go back several decades, right? And my family moved here from Montreal back in the early 80s, and we saw hockey and religion of a different sort with the Habs back in the day. And then we experienced it all of a sudden with this upstart Oilers team of the 80s, right? Taking on these big, bad New York Islanders and losing and suffering heartbreak and having this, you know, Jesus-like player in Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier and all of these future Hall of Famers. And then all of a sudden they started winning cups, and it just became a regular thing year after year. So I think whether you're a new fan or an old fan, especially if you're a new fan, that's all you've been hearing about from this fan base for decades, about how great things used to be and how there were parades every summer down Jasper Ave, you know, 5 cups out of 7 years. Like, I mean, they were literally spoiled, rotten, right, with all of this winning. And then it just kind of hit the ditch, and things didn't go great during the 90s and the 2000s. And then all of a sudden this guy named Connor McDavid shows up. So you know, I think this new fan base has an identity of their own, an identity they can kind of grab onto with this new team and with this new, crop of stars in Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. And so, I think the combination of both has been just on display now, right? I think a lot of the old fans are just proud of this team and how they're playing now and getting back to the Stanley Cup final back to back. I mean, this team hasn't done that since back in the day, in the glory days. So I think it's attracting fans of all different types of generations, right?
Judith, I gotta say, I heard it there. I heard it in the storytelling that Min just did. I don't even know if Min realized what he was doing, but he was like, "We were a persecuted people, and now we are back to glory." Like that was the arc of that story. The sort of like you just kind of naturally wove in there. Judith, in your piece, you mentioned a TikTok video from last year's playoffs that particularly was emblematic, I think, of what makes Edmonton Oilers fandom kind of unique. Do you want to talk about that video, what we saw in that video, and why it was so significant?
Oh boy, I would love to. And while Min was talking, I was like, "Oh, it's just like the video. Like this is so familiar to me." Because I was humming and hawing about writing this piece. So I'm like, "Is it necessary for the world to have this take?" But
it is.
Once I saw this video, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Because it's on TikTok, as one was. I was scrolling, and this user, Adrienne B, posted a video of her father dancing a celebratory dance, kind of after the Oilers were winning in the last playoffs, and the caption said, "My first generation immigrant oil rig working Filipino father who has never played a second of hockey in his life, happily cheering for the Oilers advancing in the playoffs. Better bring that cup home for him, oily boys." And end quote.
Yeah.
And I was so struck by that. I mean, also I was moved. I want to be honest. Like I was also like, yeah. like bring it home for that lady's dad. Like I was so excited about it because what was also interesting for me in this instance is that we have a new fan who's kind of merging their identity with the identity of this fandom. And what's interesting in this case is they're not just kind of merging with the story that Min says folks are sharing. Like it's a generous fan base, open arms, bringing people into this story, but it's also a person who's cheering for the Oilers, not just because they're the local team, but because they're an oil team, right? This person is an oil worker who might feel like their labor is not valued or their identity, that part of their identity is not valuable to them. And then here's this team winning. And this is not uncommon, like with religion and sport or the history of sports, like teams often have like industry inspired names, like the Steelers, the Pistons. There's Oilers teams all over Texas. You won't be surprised to hear. So they're kind of doing a double duty identity wise. And in these comments, like of the comments of the article, people are also affirming this identity, right? One of the interesting comments in the video was someone saying that this is a quintessentially Canadian experience, not just to like merge your labor with hockey. One commenter said, "Nice, he just reached peak Canadian."
That's a deeply telling thing. We got about a minute left here. Min, I want to say that the CBC reported that Alberta politics, obviously becoming increasingly polarized. You see Conservative Premier Danielle Smith has been in the news a lot lately for a number of controversial moves, including the pushing for maybe a referendum from separating from Canada. When you look at this moment and you look at the Oilers right now and the importance of hockey as kind of a unifying tool in this political climate, how is it functioning as a unifying tool, you think?
Well, I'm sure in that moss pit, you've got people who have opposing views, especially when it comes to separation and politics. But when they're in the moss pit and when they're supporting the team, that all gets pushed aside and they are hugging each other after each goal. They might even put each other up on their shoulders. And little do they know, they probably, are at loggerheads online and when they're talking about politics, but that doesn't get discussed when it comes down to wins and losses, especially in the playoffs. So it absolutely is unifying. It would be great if it would help unify everybody when it comes to politics too, but sports and politics, two separate ball games, so to speak.
Okay, so I know that we played La Bamba off the top, which is the traditional Oilers victory song. But just before we go, I want to play you a song that has now become the new Oilers anthem, maybe, question mark? Let's hear it.
Pink Pony Club, I'm gonna keep on dancing at the Pink Pony Club.
I like watching both of you just begin to immediately dance as this starts to happen.
It's a vibe.
I did 100%. Judith, last word to you. This is Chapel Rowan's Pink Pony Club. It's kind of become the song that gets played inside the locker room after every playoff victory. How did that happen? How does a sort of a gay pride anthem song find its way to an Oilers locker room, you think, Judith?
Oh man. Well, personally, like it's not a juxtaposition to me at all. First of
Yeah.
all, Chapel Roan is a winner. So this is just a good kinship for them. Also, the pageantry and kind of spectacle inherent in a Chapel Roan performance is also at the center of sport. So I
Mhm.
think that this is a meeting of dear friends in this moment.
I would like to keep watching this fandom get as wild as possible for as long as possible. So I hope that they win tomorrow, and then I hope that this keeps happening. Thank you so much for your time. You guys are great. Thank you so much.
This has been
Thank you
great.
so
Thanks for
much.
having me.
Yes, of course. Talk to you soon. Min Dhariwal is a reporter with Radioactive in CBC Edmonton, and Judith Ellen Brunton is a professor of religious studies from Alberta, currently at Rice University in Houston. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, I want to switch gears and just, if you don't mind, I'm going to play you some of the most influential songs that I can think of. It's hard not to sing along as I'm playing you these songs. Those are, of course, Sly and the Family Stone, a band that changed music. It's not an understatement to say so. Sly Stone, their band leader, died this week. He was 82 years old. Sly was a genius. He brought funk, rock, and soul music together in a way that no one had done before him. Michael Williams is here to talk about this legendary musician. Michael, good morning to you. Hey, look, it's nice to have you here, man. Thank you
It's
for
great
being
to be here. Thank you for asking me to be here
Yes,
on this,
of
man. I
course.
really appreciate it. Sly is just, well,
Sly,
Sly
right?
is Sly, yeah.
Yeah, I think, when you hear Dance to the Music, like just like the first 15 seconds of that song, it just like has every instrument at its highest. Everybody's doing a wild thing, and there's Sly. Tell me about what comes to mind when you think about Sly and the Family Stone, but also Sly's legacy.
Fearless, that he was completely musically educated, but fearless in his pursuit of the quest of bringing audiences together. I think the changes musically he did were revolutionary in American music. He's the guy that made the ham bone, which was something that was looked down upon in the black community. He took that and made it famous, did it at Woodstock, stole the show. He was one of the first recognized crossover artist of his generation, which meant that he had an equal audience in black and white. They weren't divided, the audience. He brought them all together. And like Prince, he incorporated the complete history of black music, but not just black music. He was well educated in all forms of music, and he brought it into it. The melodies, the rhythms, the American motifs from the past to the present. Thing that helped him too was that he was a DJ.
Right.
He was a DJ, so he played all of this music, and he just helped to change music in America. Jefferson Airplane, he produced Got Somebody to Love, the Beau Brummels, their hit. The Grateful Dead, formerly the Warlocks. He produced all of these bands and taught them how to play, because some of them didn't know how to play. And of course, he wound up with the Family Stone, which was revolutionary till the end.
The number of musicians that owe something to Sly is so significant. You have like people like Stevie Wonder owe something to Sly, but so does Kendrick Lamar. Like it's quite a sort of legacy to leave behind. Sly said in interviews that he was nervous before going on stage, but then when he did go on stage, he was something that you just couldn't take your eyes off of him. Let's just hear a little bit of one of his legendary performances. I like Michael. I feel like you're channeling your own Sly right now as you're kind of sitting down in this chair.
Well, yeah, like you say, you could not take your eyes off of him. He stole Woodstock. I mean, from every performer except for Hendrix. They were the two brightest lights on that stage at the weirdest hours.
That was him at Woodstock.
That was him at Woodstock.
Yeah.
And
Talk to me about Sly at Woodstock. How was that performance?
It was he stole the show.
Right.
What else can I say?
Yeah.
He stole the show. It was so energetic. It was church. It was like going to church. And it was absolutely incredible. You can see the whole performance because it's available on DVD, if you can find a DVD someplace. And it's also available on YouTube. But I went to see the film like the day that it came out, and they gave you a wonderful book with it that I still have. And it was magic to me. It was everything I needed to see being a young black man, and it brought audiences together. That was the wonderful thing that impressed me about Sly, was that he brought all of the warring factions together.
It's a thing you keep returning to as we talk about this, right? But like the idea, like that the original members of Sly and the Family Stone were different walks of life. You know, men, women, black and white. Everyone sort of had their moment in a song. It wasn't just entirely around him. Tell me about this idea of making this inclusive project. How is that a reflection, you think, of Sly's politics?
In the film, my favorite thing in the film is when he says, "Don't hate the black, don't hate the white. If you get the bite, hate the bite." Right? And so, again, bringing people together. There were men, there were women, there was family members on the stage, there was Larry Graham on the stage. And if you notice, everybody played a part. His sister even broke off into another group called Little Sister, and she did a track called I'm the One. The interesting thing about Sly to me was that he always, and I don't think people really got this, he talked about the problem, and then he gave you possible solutions to the problem. In Stand and Family Affair, newlyweds, a year ago, still checking each other out, don't know. One, mom loves the both of them, but one she loves, the other one's in the mud, sort of thing. So he proposed those problems, and no one really talked in music that way, I think, at that time. So it spoke to both sides automatically and instantly. That's why he was really one of the first big crossover artists other than Sam Cooke. So he was great for both audiences, and he never walked that weird racial line.
Right. He wouldn't sort of like say, I only belong to this one
He
audience.
didn't choose one or the other,
No.
and because of that, him, Earth, Wind and Fire, Jimi Hendrix, all of the Last Poets, all of these groups were suspect to the FBI and the CIA and were investigated completely, and sometimes thwarted in their efforts.
Because actually, like, to become successful in speaking to all those audiences in that way,
They didn't like that.
it made you kind of a threat in certain
It
folks.
made them very nervous when
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix did a benefit for the Black Panthers, and the Black Panthers wanted Sly to do something, and I don't think that he did. He was sort of just very inclusive. So what you saw on the stage was, as you say, male, female, black, white, Italian, African American. They were just divided, but they were the greatest players. And he did that. He brought that audience to him. No one else had an audience like that before Sly.
I want to talk about the politics of Sly in just a moment, but also I keep returning to this quote that Miles Davis had, which is the idea that like he had no peers except for Sly Stone. That was the thing that Miles said.
Yeah.
So there's one thing to sort of function politically as this place where people come to gather. It's another thing, I think, to sort of be looked at as like the very pinnacle of music. Talk to me about what made Sly special musically speaking.
Musically speaking was his education. He had a complete music education, not only in the church, but in classical music and traditional forms of American music. So boys and girls, education is important. Read those books, go to school, learn that stuff. I mean, his melodies, his vocal arrangements. I mean, come on, he made, do doom 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 doom. He made an audience of millions do that, and some of the phrases that he would have thrown off became our touchstones musically, and it was just beautiful. I mean, you heard elements from the church, you heard elements of the street, and then you heard other things that you had never heard before. Because when he began to experiment with keyboards in the 808 and stuff like that, he was the first one to use those things, other than, let's say, Robert Moog, who was along, and Dick Hyman and people like that. No, Sly sat in a room and experimented with this stuff until he got what he wanted out of it. Then he would play over it. It was magic. It was just magic.
Michael, I'm a bit conscious of the time because we have
Yes.
about 30 seconds left on the radio here. So for the folks listening to us on the radio, we're almost out of time right now.
Yes.
If you're watching us on YouTube or Spotify, stick around. There's more of this conversation to come. Michael Williams is a former MuchMusic VJ, host, producer, and writer. He also helped curate a new exhibit at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. It's called Retro, Popular Music in Canada from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Commotion will be back tomorrow. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. Can't wait to see you then. Hang around. Okay, Michael, I want to pick it up on the return to the idea of the politics thing, because what you get in the 60s and the 70s is a lot of deeply politically engaged music, right? Like the outcry that you get against the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement. Sly did most of his speaking through the music. And so, Marvin Gaye puts out What's Going On, big record, gets acclaimed as one of the greatest records of all time. What's Going On as a question mark is a little bit of a tame question. And Sly has a response to that. And his response is, there's a riot going on, and it's sort of a direct answer to Marvin Gaye, what he's got. So what is the impact of the riot record here?
The impact of the riot record is this: Marvin Gaye always arrived just in time when there was a change going through, and we needed Marvin. Let's get it on. What's going on? Yeah. That was the chronicles of his brother's experience in Vietnam. Yeah. Sly was out in L.A., and that record, if you open the record and look at the sleeve, first thing, everyone almost in black music of the day, from Miles Davis on, was on that record. The only credits that you have as to who's on the record is a bunch of Polaroid photographs in a montage, because no one was allowed to do the record according to their record company. So he did not put anyone's name on it. Yeah. And then you had the song Family Affair, which was the first romance he had with the 808 and electronics, and it was so incredibly different. But throughout the record, you had so much experimentation going on. It was a very, very important record. And it didn't, beyond Family Affair, that was it. Everybody else went, yeah, love and hate and this and that. It's okay. They didn't really listen to it. But they forgot. Miles Davis was on that record. George Clinton, All the Parliament and Funkadelic was on that record. If you were in black music and going through L.A., you stopped by that mansion and you got your little piece of that record.
Actually, I think we have a bit of Family Affair. Maybe the control. We don't have Family Affair. We do have Family Affair. Let's hear a little bit of Family Affair. Yes. Come on now. That is Family Affair, Sly and the Family Stone. Listen, the Riot record was not an easy record to make because Sly was struggling a lot at this period of time, right? Very publicly.
Absolutely.
Drug issues, missing some concerts. He showed up hiding some interviews, fighting with the band. You're a young fan at this point. You're trying to watch somebody that you love kind of fall apart publicly. What was that like to watch?
Ooh, well, first thing, just to say that I didn't say before, that record changed music when people finally listened to it. Right. After that, Miles would record a track called Sly. Herbie Hancock did a track dedicated to Sly. And watching your heroes fall, like Gil Scott-Heron or Sly, was really rough. In my top drawer of a desk in my bedroom at my mother's house, I still have 2 tickets to Leo's Casino Sly performance that he never showed up at. Okay? So it was pretty rough, but like Gil Scott-Heron, every time he woke up and did something brilliant musically and talked to you, it was more brilliant than the thing that he said before. But you still know your artist buddy is going through those problems, and I'm just so happy that the film came about before he passed away. But it was rough, and it's almost like that was the burden of black genius.
So that's the film you're talking about is Questlove's documentary, Sly Lives.
Yes.
And the subtitle of it is The Burden of Black Genius. The arc of the film is a sad one, right? Because it's like a behind the music documentary, which is like, here's the height, but also you kind of know that the fall is coming. And I think like there's something emotionally difficult about watching that arc, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Even in a lot, that to me changes the music documentary, because normally music document happy this that the other and boom and we got a new record or a best of or something like that.
Yeah.
But Garland Jeffries' documentary, The King of In Between, and this documentary takes it to another place where the artist eventually is comfortable with what he did in his own skin, and he's not bemoaning the past. He's not regretting the past. He understands his influence completely and is very happy with what he did, except for not as happy with the downfall. But the burden of Black genius is survival. Because being a Black journalist, being a Black musician, being popular and being Black, being a basketball, everybody's waiting for the fall, and sometimes they help with it. They give you everything, then they take everything away. The most difficult thing for a Black parent is this: having a child in America at that time, having a child, sending that child to school, and having that child come back alive the way that you let them go in the morning. Because in America, that didn't happen a lot. It's not a given. And in my neighborhood, that didn't happen a lot. A lot of my friends died. So the burden of Black genius is the burden of being Black, first and foremost, that nothing is guaranteed. And even if you have it, it can be taken away. And one thing that can be taken away is not just your voice to your audience, but your life.
A couple of days ago on the show, we talked about how Malcolm X has kind of been frozen in amber, kind of like in terms of his legacy, because we really only talk about Malcolm the firebrand and not Malcolm the father, and not Malcolm the sort of like the later steps that followed in his life. And maybe a similar, not to say they did the exact same function, but I think like Sly, kind of a similar thing in the sense that we talk about this period where he burned so bright and everything was so difficult. We don't really talk about Sly the father, who sort of like tried to figure out his relationships with his children later, you know?
I was blessed to have interviewed Betty Shabazz and Malcolm's daughters. And they told me about that. They said Malcolm was incredibly funny. He was very bright, and he was very funny. He was a really great dad, and he was really funny. And to sit at the feet of Betty Shabazz and have her tell me about her husband, things that I would never read, I would never find out in any media.
That record doesn't exist.
It does not exist. It does not exist. And what you have here is you have Sly's family, his kids talking about him, and his kids missing him and stuff like that. Same thing with Doug and the Slugs of Doug. I'm in that film. And at the end, when we did the showing, the one thing I did was I stood up and I thanked his family publicly for sharing him with us, because I know my father played saxophone in a band and he wasn't home. So I get that feeling, and they could have used him at home.
There's a cost to that.
There's a cost. There's always a cost. So it's almost like the burden, that Black burden.
Right. I think when I think about Sly and the story that we tell about Sly and that documentary existing, it really feels like Questlove is maybe engaging in a project of archiving Black genius. You know, like there's a Summer of Love documentary, the Sly documentary. You mentioned he's working on an Earth, Wind, and Fire documentary. So he's kind of trying to dip into these moments of Black genius to try to say we need an archive of this. We need to sort of like maybe preserve it in a sense. When you think about Sly and how we all kind of like know some of the big hits here, in your view, what are some of the songs that people maybe don't know necessarily, and they should spend a bit more time with, because like that's your own contribution to be like, hey, we should preserve this genius also, and also talk about this. Talk about Dance to the Music, but also talk about these other songs too.
Well, Fresh was his last perfect album. Fresh was equal.
I don't think I've ever heard Fresh.
Fresh was the album that gave you If You Want Me to Stay, and Que Sera Sera with Doris Day as well.
Oh, wow.
And there's a whole story behind that, which you can find on YouTube. Fresh was an incredible record, and Do You Want Me to Stay, I think, was the last song that people really latched onto. For me, there was an album called Back on the Track, 1979, and the song was Remember Who You Are, and that always sat here in my mind because sometimes we forget. And lyrically, again, he's just stronger than ever. And the album was good, but there was this one track. And then there's Jesse Johnson, Crazy, from the time, Jesse Johnson from the time. There's a video with him and Sly. And just like Woodstock, you cannot take your eyes off of Sly. And Jesse gives him that space because he knows better than to step in that space. But it's a duet, and Sly is so incredibly powerful. And you're riveted. And when he sings, he probably only sings for about 90 seconds or 2 minutes in a 5-minute song. But when you hear that voice and you see him, oh my God, it just destroys. So for me, Crazy by Jesse Johnson, if you want me to stay forever, the fresh album, get it if you don't have it. Back on Track, Remember Who You Are. If you ever forget, put that song on and you will remember.
Michael, like, this is why I appreciate you, because you are a walking archive of this, and you have this knowledge. Listen, before we go, I also know that you lost an old friend and colleague this week, Juliette Powell. She was, of course, the first Black woman to be crowned Miss Canada. Went on to be a VJ at Music Plus in Montreal, fixture of Toronto's music scene. Talk to me about her memory. Do you have a memory you want to share?
The last time we really had a great conversation was when I had left MuchMusic, went back to Montreal and Club Soda. I was doing a show with my friend Gil, the first show with him, Gil Scott Heron. She called me up. She wanted to interview him and stuff, and it was like, I don't know, but let's talk anyway. How you doing? I'm back in town. And she was just a fixture of Montreal, and she as beautiful as she was as articulate, and she just had a genius and a huge brain. And she was an innovator in the internet. When she left Canada, she went on to be one of those people to not only support the internet, but do a lot of McLuhan-esque sort of work around the internet, around the world. And she just really helped. She was needed, and the world took to her like they should have, and she was just a genius at what she did. On air, she was so much fun and so wonderful, and out in the world has this internet entrepreneur. She did very, very well, and we all miss her very much. The whole city of Montreal, if not the whole country, is crying and wishing her family well.
Well, Michael, I'm sorry for your loss, man. I really appreciate you being here.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, of course.
Cheers.
Michael Williams is a former MuchMusic VJ, host, producer, and writer. He also helped curate the new exhibition at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. It's called Retro, Popular Music in Canada from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back tomorrow. We'd love to see you then.